Welcome everybody. So today we are going to try to address the lack of information for foundational concepts for vibe coding. Essentially, vibe coding sites just want to get your information. They want you to pay. They want you to try to go for building your idea with none of the foundational knowledge, which will cost you more money and just basically waste more of your time. So what I want to go through is just talk about the basics and kind of bring into everybody's field of view, especially as a founder, trying to build their idea, trying to showcase, what's really necessary to know. And this is definitely not everything, but this is a good starting foundation point for you guys. Just kind of navigating around and understanding what you're trying to build eventually with vibe coding. So first off, absolutely need to know, what is a URL? That's a URL, just basically the website that we have. This website is being hosted. That means it's built, it's all the way done. They host it. Normally you're going to send this out to somebody, a third party that's going to host your website. It's going to have a small fee based on how many people are using it. That fee can go up. If you get a super busy website, this fee will go up by even more. But for the most part, you host something out on what is called a server that somebody is running, and that way you're not hosting it from your local computer. You don't have to have your computer on all the time. That's normally how it goes, and it's the best case of work for that. So when we are a user, say one of you all come to vibelabs.replit.app, when you go to that site, it's going to hit that server and it's going to bring that information back to you. That is a good starting point as far as how this is all working. And then what we're looking at here is our page or our view. And what is a page or a view? Well, it's just basically everything you're looking at. Everything on this page is the page or the view. The header is the top thing on the page. So you can see this right up here. All of this content up here is something that's going to be reused across different pages of my website. Similar to that, the footer will also be reused. It's just reusable content that is nice to have information and navigation benefits in our case today. Well, what is navigation benefits? Navigation benefits is a nav bar or navigation bar that takes you to different routes on your URL. So you can see right now, currently, if we click on this as many times as we want, nothing changes because we are already on this route. This route doesn't have anything after this because this is our home route. If I click on explore, you're going to see that this changes. We are now on the /explore route. What is on the /explore route? Well, it's our advanced learning materials in this case today. So you're going to then see this information being displayed. Now, what is actually changing is the content in between our header and our footer. As the header and footer are more or less static, besides you can see that we are clicked on this one. But this content has changed to a different, what is called component. And that component is being read on via the code on this route. So this route basically displays this component, and the component has everything on this page that you're seeing now. And then similar for the community there. So that's how our navigation bar is working. So if we go back to our page here, we have our hero banner, which is kind of like a photo with a little bit of information that you'll see at the top of websites. Some people say this goes in and out of style, but currently I have one here. As we come down, we can see that there's this little background effect beyond our content here. And then you're going to see this up next section, which is kind of all of this right here, that is kind of categorized by these titles. So you can see my classes section, and then there's another one down below. So on our component, we have our hero banner in this case, and then we have our up next section, and then we have our my classes section. And in these sections, we have what is called, in this case, a card. So you can see day one has this kind of card-like feature, and this is a very common term with our content inside of this. So there's three things going on inside of this card to understand. We have our HTML, which is basically our text. We have this little picture here included in the HTML brought in. But all of this text is just text. That's all it is. That is HTML, and it's kind of divvied out a little bit more in the code that you guys don't really need to understand. But what's important is the font is a little bit different colors, different sizes. That is CSS. The color on this button down here is CSS. That's what changes and gives it its look. How wide this card is. Is it oh, is this like 65, 70% of the width of my screen, or is it 25% of the width of my screen? That's all kind of contained inside of CSS. So inside of our card here, I guess a better way to look at it, inside of our component, everything in the body section, inside of our up next section in the component, we have the card with our HTML and CSS. Now, if that's where our web page ends, that'd be kind of boring. But we have this button that you can see it kind of highlights a little effect via CSS. And then that brings in our third term, which is JavaScript. JavaScript kind of gives action to our page. So when we click continue learning, this action occurs that takes us to this new route. That is JavaScript. So here we are on our new route, and you can see all the new information. And that all happened because of HTML and CSS we could read, and then JavaScript made the action happen. So we kind of covered most of these here. One thing we kind of glazed over was redirect. You definitely want, if somebody hits a page, for example, you hit vibelabs.replit.app/admin and you're not an admin of the website, it's going to redirect you to the home page because you don't have those privileges. That's another thing. You'll see admins have specific privileges on a page, whereas users have different privileges, and that's to add the experience and protect vital information. We talked about components, we talked about cards. Modals are some type of pop-up. Maybe you click something, it pops up a form, which you fill out. Maybe it's a login, you hit login. It pops up this form, you fill out your login information, username, email, address, and then you hit login, which is going to send you to that home page that we saw earlier via that button, which is a call to action, sign up or login, or go to explore page, basically all those different types of things. So content or visual terms, these are not specific to devs. This may be something that you guys are familiar with. And these two below are things that are good to understand as you get a little bit more advanced in this, but they are definitely terms worth covering eventually. But color palette, you definitely want to have some type of theme on your web page. You definitely want to have some type of icons that support text. So in case the icon doesn't appear, or you have a blind user that's only listening for terms to be read on your page, you want that to all work out. Typography, that font choices and styling, you want to have a good theme across your entire website. We kind of talked about all of these. And these three are kind of built out inside of a framework. You can just think of a tool to build these out more efficiently. These can have different costs eventually with them, so it's important to understand what you're building on. For the most part, it won't matter too much, but we will go into more on that in the future. And then we kind of covered some of these earlier. The server, kind of where we're hitting vibelabs.replit.app on your hosted site. The database, it's storing our user information, our class information. It's just basically a place to store that information online for people to pull the server and database together. And then API is like an external tool that makes your life a little bit easier. Maybe you have a banking app that needs to access another banking app. You can maybe bring in a third party like API, or even a better example, let's say you have a website, you're building your website out, and you need to have payment processing. There's something called Stripe that is very easy to integrate into your website and handles all the logistics of that, so you don't mess up on stuff that you don't really, obviously you want to get the money out of the product, but you want to make sure that that is a seamless process, you don't leak information, things of that nature. That's what integrating a third-party API like Stripe can do. And normally it's just a key and a little bit more of a process to hook that up, but it's a nice experience once it's all done. And then model, not super important right now, but in our back end, which is just not the stuff you're looking at, it's the stuff that's happening behind the scenes. You want to have a good model. Like I have a user, users can do XYZ, products can do XYZ, products can be bought, products can be sold, products can be created, things of that nature. And then with the controller, you handle that process of something called CRUD, which is create, read, update, delete. I want to be able to create a product on my site. I want to be able to have a user read that product. I want to be able to update that product's price or name. And I want to be able to delete that product if it no longer exists. That's kind of what you're doing on there. And then when that happens, it takes it out of the database or changes it in the database. And then the user that's on your website hitting that server can then view that information. And then responsive design, a little bit more complicated in looking at it and thinking through it, but Vibecoding is doing a good job of making that happen, but there are things that slip through that don't look good on different devices. And then search engine optimization is just basically a little bit of setup in making sure that when people search for something along the lines of your product, that these search engines know what you're actually selling. And then accessibility, making sure it's accessible for everybody, especially as you guys get bigger. Just keep that in mind, accessibility, and then we can look more into that in the future. But hopefully all of these topics kind of cover some of the basics for everybody, and you can get a good idea of what you're doing kind of moving forward with Vibecoding. Have a good one.